This is the VOA Special English Economics Report. 11 countries first began to use the euro in 1999. Today, 17 of the 27 members of the European Union are in the euro area. The euro's foreign exchange value has remained strong against the dollar and other currencies. But economic growth in the euro area was only 0.2% from April to June. Europe's biggest economy, Germany, grew at half that rate. Ireland, Portugal, and Greece have all required rescues. Greece received emergency loans twice. Debt and other problems in southern Europe remain a big concern. In early August, the European Central Bank bought more than $30 billion in Italian and Spanish debt securities. Italy and Spain have yet to recover from the worldwide recession. The purchases of their government debt helped reduce their borrowing costs, but the bank will probably have to act again. On August 16th, German Chancellor Angela Merkel and French President Nicolas Sarkozy met in Paris. They discussed economic governance for the euro area and cooperation on budget and tax policies. Chancellor Merkel said, "We want France and Germany to move closer in terms of fiscal integration." Their proposal calls for a true European economic government. It would include the leaders of the 17 euro countries and would be led by the European Union president. The group would meet at least twice a year. One goal would be to control budget deficits for euro area countries. Rules limit the deficits of EU members to 3% of the size of their economies. But many members, including France, have bigger deficits than that. The two leaders also proposed a tax on financial dealings in Europe. But they did not support the idea of euro bonds. These would be loans guaranteed by all euro countries instead of only the governments seeking them. The European Commission says it supports the French and German proposals. The Commission proposes and enforces legislation for the EU. An EU spokesman said, "We already mentioned the need to strengthen the economic part of the Economic and Monetary Union. What is happening now since the beginning of the crisis and what has been announced as a proposal by France and Germany go exactly in this direction." But many experts question whether European countries will be willing to surrender individual powers and deal with their debt problems together. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. This is the VOA Special English Economics Report. India is traditionally a tea-drinking country, but Indians are gaining a new taste for coffee. This has led international coffee companies to consider moving into the market. At the same time, local business people are looking for new ways to profit from the country's tea-drinking tradition. They are opening new places that offer tea. Coffee shops have spread from major cities like New Delhi and Mumbai to smaller towns. In the past 10 years, cafes have become increasingly popular. India's huge population of young people has quickly taken to the coffee culture. Indians now drink twice as much coffee as they did 10 years ago. The success of the coffee market has gained the attention of foreign companies like Starbucks. The American-based company will open its first store in India later this year. Other companies like Lavazza and Costa Coffee are already there. The head of the India Coffee Trust, Anil Kumar Bhandari, praises Starbucks' decision. He says cafes in India have become central to the lifestyle of the young middle class. He says coffee companies like Starbucks should have been here before. Almost any cafe chain which has a reasonable quality with its service, ambiance, and food, and coffee first, will succeed in this country. Look at the young population, he says. They are all taking to it like ducks to water. India has over 1 billion people. Business experts point out that half of them are under the age of 25. Yet, even with the growth in coffee drinking, Indians still drink 8 times more tea. They have been drinking tea for more than 150 years. India is also one of the world's biggest producers of tea, or chai, as people call it locally. Indians usually drink tea at home or in offices, or buy it mostly from street sellers. But some business people hope to change that. Amulik Singh Bidral is 36 years old and a graduate of Harvard University in the United States. He opened a place called Chai Point in Bangalore, the center of India's information technology industry. In less than a year, 13 more Chai Point locations have opened in the city. One tea drinker in Bangalore welcomes the new outlets. Out-of-home options like this are new, especially since coffee drinking has boomed in the last couple of years. This is a little different. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
From VOA Learning English, welcome to Economics in Special English. The International Labor Organization says nearly 200 million people are without jobs around the world. And the ILO is warning of even higher unemployment this year. The United Nations agency released a report called Global Employment Trends 2013. It says the number of unemployed worldwide rose by more than 4 million last year from the year before. The report says 1/4 of this increase was in developed economies. The remaining 75% was in mainly developing economies in Asia and in African countries south of the Sahara Desert. The report also says an estimated 39 million people stopped looking for work last year. The average length of unemployment increased sharply in developed economies. 1/3 of all job seekers in wealthy countries were unemployed for a year or more. The ILO's Director General, Guy Ryder, says the world's economic recovery is not expected to be strong enough to reduce unemployment quickly. His group says the labor market is especially hard for young people. The ILO says 12.6% of people between the ages of 15 and 24 are unemployed worldwide. It says more and more young people who experience long-term unemployment stop looking for work. This prevents them from gaining needed on-the-job experience. Guy Ryder says, to create jobs, all countries must provide more predictable policies. He says these include measures to raise wages and support buying. He says countries should enact reforms to strengthen their banking industries so banks can provide credit. For VOA Learning English, I'm Carolyn Presutti.
I'm Alex Villarreal with the VOA Special English Economics Report. America's biggest car maker accepted $50 billion in federal aid from the Obama and Bush administrations. People joked that GM meant government motors. Now General Motors could be on the road to recovery. The company recorded over $2.5 billion in profit in the first half of the year. The government still owns 61% of GM as a result of the bailout. Canada is also a shareholder. But now GM plans to sell stock to the public again. GM spent just 40 days in bankruptcy. It sought protection from its creditors in June of last year. GM restructured. It discontinued some vehicles and closed dealerships and factories. In April, GM repaid almost $7 billion in government loans. Many of its creditors are waiting to see how much they get. GM plans an IPO, an initial public offering of stock, later this year. The company could raise as much as $15 billion. Chief Executive Edward Whittaker left the company September 1st. He wants the government to sell all of its shares in the company during the IPO. Many experts believe the Treasury will act slowly over time after the public offering is completed. If the stock price rises, the government could profit from the rescue. But the IPO is risky for the company. The offering will test the willingness of investors to take an equity share in the new GM. Buying equity is not like buying bonds. Bonds represent a loan. Equity represents ownership. Investors willing to buy equity shares in a company expect one thing: growth. GM believes it can make that happen, in part with a new electric and gas hybrid car. The Chevrolet Volt can go up to 64 kilometers before it uses any gas at all. The Volt is expected to start arriving in showrooms later this year. GM is also looking overseas. The world's fastest-growing car markets are in developing nations. GM is now selling more cars in China than in the United States. GM still leads the American market, although Toyota is now the biggest car company in the world. There are signs that America's big three car makers may have put the worst of their recent troubles behind them. Chrysler also went through bankruptcy and says its sales are up. Italy's Fiat holds a 20% share. Ford Motor Company avoided bankruptcy and refused government help. Ford reported close to $5 billion in profit for the first 6 months of the year. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. This is the VOA Special English Economics Report. The best example of something is often called the gold standard. It sets the standard against which other things are measured. In economics, The term describes how major trading nations once used gold to set currency values and exchange rates. Many nations continued to use the gold standard until the last century. In the United States, people could exchange paper money for gold from the 1870s until 1933. President Richard Nixon finally disconnected the dollar from the value of gold in 1971. Some politicians from time to time call for a return to the gold standard. But in 1978, the International Monetary Fund ended an official gold price. The IMF also ended the required use of gold in transactions with its member countries. Since that time, gold prices have grown, but unevenly. Prices, uncorrected for inflation, have hit record highs recently, above $1,400 an ounce. But people keep buying. Nyang Chan Nguyen is a gold shop owner in the Cambodian capital, Phnom Penh, and says, "Some of my customers have even bought more as they believe the price will probably go higher. I sell more gold at these higher prices." Some people are gold bugs. These are investors who say people should buy gold to protect against inflation. People have valued gold for thousands of years. The soft, dense metal polishes to a bright yellow shine and resists most chemical reactions. It makes a good material for money, political power, and, more recently, electrical power. If you own a device like a mobile phone or a computer, you might own a little gold in the wiring. The gold standard was the subject of one of the best-known speeches in American political history. It took place at the 1896 Democratic National Convention in Chicago. William Jennings Bryan wanted the country to use both gold and silver as money. The idea was to devalue the dollar and make it easier for farmers to pay their debts. Bryan said, "You shall not press down upon the brow of labor this crown of thorns. You shall not crucify mankind upon a cross of gold." This speech made William Jennings Bryan famous. He was a presidential candidate 3 times, but he never won. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. You can learn more about the world every day and learn English at the same time at voaspecialenglish.com. You can also connect with us on Facebook and Twitter at VOA Learning English.
This is the VOA Special English Economics Report. China says it has passed Germany and become the world's top exporter. Exports totaled more than $1 trillion last year. That was down from 2008, but about 30 billion more than Germany. China's influence in the world has increased with its fast-growing economy. The United States remains the largest economy. China is third and gaining on Japan. Manufacturing has expanded, fueling exports. But China has not imported as much as its trade partners would like. Its policies about valuing its currency and its human rights record have also created tensions. And now there is a new dispute. China is the world's largest internet market, but Google says it may leave. The company said it was targeted by a major internet attack launched from China in December. It says intellectual property was stolen and the attackers sought access to Gmail accounts of Chinese human rights activists. At least 20 other large companies in different industries were also targeted. Also, the company said it is no longer willing to censor search results as required by Chinese law. Google says it is still observing censorship laws, but it will hold talks with the government in the coming weeks. Google.cn launched 4 years ago. Google is estimated to have around a 30% share of the search market in China. But that is only about half the share of the Chinese search engine Baidu. Baidu also reported an attack on its website in January. Online advertising sales in China are estimated to bring Google only a few $100 million a year. Not much for such a big company, notes business expert Fariborz Gadar at Penn State University. He says Google has to make a decision. It can stay in China, or it can move out so as to protect its name and brand because of the restrictions and cyber attacks. Online activity in China is closely watched, and the government tries to limit access to many sites, including VOA. In January, a foreign ministry spokeswoman said, China's internet is open and that Chinese law bars cyber attacks. Another government official said China itself is the victim of a growing number of foreign attacks. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton said she would like an explanation from the Chinese about Google's accusations. And that's the VOA Special English Economics Report. You can find more reports about economics at voaspecialenglish.com.